Cool. Yeah. So this is a very informal kind of setting. It is just kind of open to however you want to do it. I've got lots of stuff that I can go through for kind of general ESS points that we know work, some stuff that we know are the kind of the common pitfalls for what we often encounter on ESS. Happy to go through all of that just as we go. It is very casual, like I said, so feel free to drop in, drop out. That's all just down to you. Was there anything in particular that you wanted an answer to? Anything that you were finding difficult, or anything that you want to ask?
Not in general. I would say the biggest struggle I have right now is I'm getting a lot of partials. I'm having trouble keeping the interviewee in the call.
Yeah, I mean, on ESS especially, that is a constant annoyance because it is a longer survey. We've got a couple of things that we can do with that. Obviously, that's not necessarily exclusive to ESS. That can be across the board. And I think that what we know works is kind of, useful for any project. I think in general, there's a couple of things that are worth kind of keeping in mind. So if we're, say, halfway through a survey, once we pass that kind of halfway mark in our head, I find it can be quite useful to just start letting the respondent know where you are, how long's left. Obviously, if we do that before the halfway mark, that can be a bit more daunting because people can get a bit more like, oh, I thought we were further. But when you're in the kind of the back half of the survey, it can be useful just to let people know where you are, how far you've got left to go, all that sort of stuff. That can keep people feeling like you are kind of actively keeping them appraised of, where their time is going to end on the call. I think, again, with ESS, because it can be quite a dry survey, there's a lot of surveys that we do that's kind of more personal to the person that we're talking to. On ESS, obviously, we're talking about more wide-ranging business kind of acumen, training, staffing, resourcing, that sort of stuff. And so when we move between questions, I think as well, it can be really useful to just keep the person that we're speaking to engaged with little bits and pieces, just using their name, saying thank you in between questions. So that just keeps them feeling like it's a conversation. Because with longer surveys in general, that's something that I think people get feeling like it is just a kind of, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. It's not a conversation that's going back and forth. Whereas if we just, after every question or two, say, oh, brilliant, thanks, John. Okay, now on to this next one, which is, and then, we're not adding much to the, the overall time of the survey, but we're just adding in little bits of personality just to keep people feeling like it is more of a back and forth. Same thing for, just if we've got the staffing questions, or we've asked them how many staff they would consider proficient. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So, John, I'm going to keep on that kind of topic now, and we're going to move on to, and then just go into the next question, just to keep it feeling a bit more natural. So there's a segue between one question and the next, rather than what we can fall into the trap of doing, which is just asking the question, asking the next question, asking the next question. Obviously, we need to stick to the scripts whenever we're doing a survey, but that doesn't mean that we can't make it feel a little bit more personal in between the questions, because the actual questions themselves, we can't change those. Those have to be read exactly as they are on screen. But that's not to say that we can't make it a little bit more human sounding in between questions. And again, I think when we move into the kind of the back half of the survey, that's where I would start, giving them a better idea of, okay, so we've got another 5 minutes and then we'll wrap up. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I'm really aware of how valuable your time is. So firstly, thank you for your time so far. I won't keep you much longer. We're into the last section now, and that is going to be, and then, whatever that section is. So I think it just becomes, again, about making people feel like we are aware of the time that we're taking up from them, because it's not nothing, the time that we're asking of people. Some surveys that we do are less than a minute long. Those ones it's much easier to, keep people feeling like we're not wasting their time because it's a very short thing. When we
Yeah.
exceed, I'd say about, 7 or 8 minutes, that seems to be where there's a switch in people's mind where they start going, I could be doing something else right now. And so I think it really helps to just keep people feeling like we are taking an active interest in that, and
Yeah.
making sure that we are not just idly wasting their time. We are showing that, okay, we want to get this done as quickly as possible. And same thing, just for reassuring them that what we're doing is going at the fastest pace that we can. So just reminding people, cool, okay, we'll go on this next session. This is all going to be multiple choice. I'll get through this nice and quick, and then we'll move on to the last section, whatever it is, just to keep people feeling like you're keeping that in your mind as well, because they'll be thinking about it as we go through any survey. People will be kind of thinking, this is taking a while. And when we
Mm.
acknowledge that and then actually, face that head on and say, like, look, I appreciate you've given me so much of your time so far. I promise we are in the last section. We're in the last quarter now. When people have an idea in their mind about how long something will last, again, it gets a lot easier for them to justify staying on the phone to do that. Because if they just
Mm.
have no idea, in their head, this could be going on for another 30 minutes. But if we give them a realistic time frame, then I think for the people who would already leave, they're going to leave either way. For the
Mm.
people who wouldn't leave, they're not going to leave either way. But for the people who are kind of wavering in that middle ground where they've already kind of taken a bit of persuasion to get on the phone, and then we need to kind of keep, on top of them to keep them there.
Yeah.
Those ones, I feel like that's where it pays off to just say, like, look, we've got another 5 minutes or so. I really appreciate, bear with me, and then we'll get this out of the way, and then I won't have to call you back, and I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. Because yeah, those people, and obviously it's difficult to gauge where those people sit on a call. That comes down to us having to read their kind of tonal language. Are they sounding annoyed? Are they sounding fed up? And then it becomes a judgment call. Should I mention this or not? And there's no wrong answer there. That's just down to the individual call and how you think it's going. But I would never feel like, as long as you're being polite and helping them with what you're saying, if you tell someone how long you've got left, it's not going to scare them off the phone because they're committed to doing it already. They've already agreed to take part. And we don't like leaving things unfinished as a concept. We like when we can get something done. So when something is left unfinished, that's an itch in the back of our brain that we can't scratch until it's done. So just giving people that idea of how long's left can be a good motivator to just keep them where they are.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's just best to keep them engaged, keep it just conversational, keep it back and forth. It becomes a judgment call, which is, I know, a bit of a rubbish answer, but it's down to each individual call. How does this person
That's
sound?
true.
Are they sounding annoyed? Are they sounding perfectly fine? If they're sounding like it's just a perfectly fine call, leave it. Just keep it conversational, move through the call as quick as you can. If you can sense there's a bit of tension, then it becomes, okay, is this they're annoyed about having to spend the time on the call, or is it something else? Everything just becomes a little bit of detective work as you work through a call. And I think it's always
Yeah.
worth just kind of having that active ability to say, what is this person getting annoyed about? Is it the questions themselves? Is it that they think this is a bit redundant? In which case, let's pivot and go into a bit of reassurance that I know this question might seem a bit off topic, or I know this question might not seem relevant, but I promise you it is. And then, when we add that as a prefix, people can kind of get a bit more, okay, fair enough. Because that's,
Mm.
again, something that often people will think, why am I bothering with this? I don't think this is relevant to me, which is fair,
Yeah.
because often from an outside perspective, it doesn't seem relevant. It's only when you kind of look at it holistically and from the Department for Education, Skills England's, Scottish Government, whoever it is, when you look at it from their point of view, even if something isn't necessarily relevant to an individual, that can be relevant to the client, because someone having no idea about something, to them, that feels pretty irrelevant because I don't know this. Why would I need to give an answer about this? But to a client, that in and of itself is very telling for data points that they're collecting, because if this subsection of this industry is much less likely to know the answer to a question that we ask, that becomes a data point, because that then tells the client they need to improve their ability to offer support in this area, for example, because it's not something that has been, well explained. So I think that then, also becomes its own little like argument for why a question that might otherwise seem a bit irrelevant is actually worth answering, which is another sort of partials. I think people just giving up because they don't think it's relevant. So I think having that ability to argue why something that might seem completely, innocuous and besides the point is actually something that can be quite useful. Because I think again, the main sources of partials, in my experience anyway, are people getting bored with the questions, people not really understanding how long's left and thinking the worst, and then people who had a standing appointment already and had to go and do something like answer the phone, or a customer came into the shop, that sort of thing. For those ones, I think then it becomes about trying to get ahead of that at the start of the call. So oftentimes people will say, I'm waiting on a call. I'm the only person in the shop. If a customer comes in, I'm going to have to deal with that. Just reassure them, look, if that happens, that's all right. I can just stay on the line. And if you do need to nip off, I can just stay here while you deal with that. Or if they need to use the phone to take another call, I can just call back in 15 minutes. That's absolutely fine. No problem at all. Reassuring people that it's all right if they need to leave goes a long way into making them feel comfortable, because I think that's something that, again, we often take for granted, is people's ability to say no. When we feel forced into something, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do something that we feel pressured into doing. Like when we were kids, our parents told us to clean our rooms. We didn't want to because it was something we had to do and we were being forced to do it. We didn't like doing that. When we're older, we clean our rooms, A, because we want to live somewhere tidy, and B, because we know it's just kind of part of being a grown-up. We don't have to do it now, but we'll get to it when we get to it, because we want to live in a clean space. And it's the same for anything. When people feel like they've got more of a choice to do something, they're more inclined to actually stick around and do it. So when we tell people, look, if you need to leave at any point, that's absolutely fine. I can just schedule a call back and we can get in touch another day or later on today in 20 minutes, whatever it is, and then finish this off. When people feel like they've got that freedom to just scoot at any time, they're more inclined to actually help, because the back of their brain is saying, yeah, it's fine, it's no pressure, it's easy. And again, that's something that can help keep people actually on the line, because it then just becomes about, them feeling more comfortable with what we're saying and what we're trying to get them to do.
I think I get what you're getting at. Just basically let them have a bit of freedom. It's not like you don't have to stay, because I think that's something I've had issues as well. So with a lot of partials, it seems in the beginning they think it's not going to be that long, so they're just like, oh yeah, okay, go ahead, just ask the questions, and then I start asking questions, and then they realize this is actually taking a bit long now. I need to go, sort of thing.
I think the other thing that we can do that is quite useful, often we use what's called expectation anchoring for getting people on the call when they say they don't have 20 minutes. And we say, well, how about just 2 minutes, just to make a start on it? We'll see how we do. We can use the same thing throughout a survey. So if we're 10 minutes in, we know we've got another 10 minutes, and they ask, look, how long's left on this? I don't really have that much time. And we say, probably another 10 minutes or so. And they say, look, I don't have 10 minutes to spare. We'll just call it a day there. Use that same expectation anchoring approach. So look, I appreciate you don't have 10 minutes. How about just another couple of minutes? We'll just get through as much as we can. I'll be as speedy as I can, and we'll see how much more we can get through. Because again, once people have started something, they're more inclined to finish it off. if someone's got something that they absolutely have to do, you know, they've got a hard stop, they've got to leave to go get a train or to go pick their kids up from school, whatever it is, they're going to leave either way. If, on the other hand, people are just trying to not be on the phone anymore, that's where we can, you know, make gains, because even if we can get them another 2 minutes down the line and that's all we get, that's still better for us the next time we call back. However, when people agree to, like, yeah, okay, fine, just be quick, again, it just becomes about us moving through at a good pace, because often then we can actually just get them to finish it. And then, you know, that then becomes its own argument if we do another 5 minutes. And then they're like, okay, how long's left now? And we say, probably about 4 minutes. And then they go, right, fine, I do really need to leave though. That can then become a new thing. Like, look, we'll just power through. We can get this done just now, and then you don't have to bother about doing it again. And it just becomes then about kind of that constant, you know, compromise between both parties. Because if you say, like, no, I just need you to stick around for another 10 minutes, they're going to be much less inclined to think that's a good idea, because it feels like you're pressuring them into it. But if you're saying, well, look, how about just another couple of minutes, we'll see how much more we can get done, then it becomes a compromise, because you're not getting what you want, they're not getting what they want. But once they actually start working their way through it, again, they're more inclined to actually just stick it out and then finish it off. So yeah, I think it just becomes about managing people's expectations, because, you know, some people won't ask how long it's going to take at the start. Ideally, people don't, and then they just finish it in one go. Fantastic. That's the perfect one. But some people will ask how long it's going to take. We tell them 20 minutes. That's a rough estimate. Sometimes it'll take far less. Sometimes it'll take a bit longer. But I think, yeah, sometimes it is just about managing people's expectations. So sometimes that just comes down to explaining, you know, the questions that you're about to ask. You know, in this next section, I'm just going to do some very quick, very basic, you know, multiple choice questions. And then again, it's just about setting people's expectations in their own head for what's going to happen in the next minute or so. Because, I mean, again, just going back to psychology, we have an innate fear of the unknown. We don't like when there's stuff that we don't know what's going to happen. So when we give people that preface for what you're going to ask ahead of time, people are able to kind of visualize it and get a better idea of what to expect in their own head, which again helps people feel more comfortable. And when we kind of tie that all together, it just becomes about, yeah, helping people feel reassured into taking part. That's always the approach that we want to take to make people feel, you know, comfortable and happy with what we're doing.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Good stuff. Anything else that you wanted to kind of talk through, or kind of anything? Yeah.
No, not in particular. I just wanted to come in and just get just general. I thought maybe you might have a presentation that I'll just get general help with, basically, pretty much.
Yep, absolutely. I will just work through some of the kind of key stuff that we know to be problematic, I suppose, because we've done ESS for quite a while. So we have a pretty good idea of what works, what doesn't. So yeah, absolutely, I can work through some of those. Give me a second, I'll grab some examples of stuff. So I think one of the ones that trips us up quite often is on the job roles for ESS. That's one of the most common kind of problematic areas, purely because it's just one of those things that we have to involve maths, and people don't like doing maths in their head at the best of times, for the most part. So when we are asking them to start categorizing people, that can be a bit of a problem area, I suppose. When we ask people about company job roles, that can often launch people into a big speech about all the different types of jobs they have or want to have and where those are going right and wrong. We need to keep them on task because we need to categorize as we go through, whether that's managerial, secretarial, admin roles, plant and machine operatives, all of that. When people start going off on tangents, that's again where we can start adding time, where people will then start thinking, wow, this is taking ages. And we're like, yeah, because you've been talking for 10 minutes straight. So we need to keep them on task for those questions. Firstly, as I mentioned, set expectations as we go. So before we ask a question about the staff breakdown, just explain to them what they can and can't say. So I'm going to ask several individual questions about the staffing breakdown at this site. So that's going to be, how many people do you have in elementary occupations? Do you have people in elementary occupations? Yes, no, or numbers. Just make it clear to them what they can answer. So in this next set of questions, you can only give me numbers as an answer. I can't take anything else. Just so I can get everything in accurately and just so I'm making sure that your time is looked out for. Same thing, if it's yes or no, we don't need numbers for these bits. We just need a yes or a no for if they exist. Does elementary occupations exist, at this site, or is everyone there something else? So it is just a yes or a no. We can only code those. If we need any further information, we will ask for it. But again, it just becomes about setting their expectations. Throughout these, people will invariably try and give you the numbers as we go. Do feel free to scribble those down. So whenever I worked on ESS, I would always have a note paper next to my laptop. So as we went through, when they invariably said, oh yeah, we've got 10 people in elementary occupations or managerial or secretarial, I would just make a note that said 10 people in managerial. And then when we get to those points, I can then refer back to that and say, so you mentioned before you had 10 people in managerial. Was that correct? And it gives you as well just a quick glance. If they say a completely different number, you can double check that rather than it becoming, something that you then have to go back and correct.
Okay.
Lastly,
Quickly,
yeah.
So I wanted to ask something quickly, just about that. It reminded me of something. So not particularly for job roles, but in general, obviously, how some people might ramble on and give a bit more information. Let's say, for example, we were asking, do you have any job role openings right now? And then they might say, yeah, I have one for reception, one for as a team member, and so on. Would we be okay to use the answers they've given before for the questions that come after when we're asking what occupations are you hiring for?
I think again there it becomes, you can definitely refer back to it and say, so earlier you mentioned, however, we still need to ask the questions as they appear on screen.
Okay.
Because we still need to make sure that we are kind of asking everything as it appears. We can never deviate from that. But yeah, I think in general, people will often confuse themselves if they don't have the crib sheet available, can't access that at a computer. People will often confuse themselves and kind of get themselves lost. We can keep a note as we go, but yeah, we still need to read everything as it appears. But if you do notice people making mistakes, that brings us neatly on to don't be afraid to interrupt people. I think often we can feel a bit rude when we try and interrupt people. As long as we don't do that rudely, there's no issue there. Because if we say, John, shut up for a minute, I think you've made a mistake, then yeah, they're going to get very annoyed, and rightly so. But if we say, oh, John, I'm just going to stop you for a second there. The only answers I can take here are yes, no answers. I want to make sure that we're moving through this at a good clip. Or, if we get to, for example, when they categorize all the staff and then it comes up with an error and says, you've said 32, we've actually got 40 here, or whatever it is. Again, it just becomes about making sure that they stop, because if they're mid-sentence and we just let them ramble on, it's just eating into our and their time. So there, I think it just becomes about interrupting politely. Use their name to interrupt them. John, I'm just going to stop you for a second because I think we've made a mistake somewhere. It's brought up an error on my screen, so I just need to go back and double check these numbers. it's again, it's not about being rude or not being rude. It's, you know, it's not something that we are doing to inconvenience people. It's something that we need to kind of look out for them, to keep their best interests at heart. So I think it is just about doing so in a polite manner. As long as we don't do it rudely, people aren't going to take offense, because, you know, as soon as if anyone was kind of getting like, why are they interrupting me? As soon as we explain why we're interrupting them, it immediately defeats any annoyance that they might have had, because then it just becomes, oh, right, yeah, fair enough, something's gone wrong. If we just said, I'm just going to stop you there, and then moved on to another question, that would probably annoy them because we hadn't given an explanation for it. But, you know, when we are interrupting people, often it just becomes about, yeah, as I said, using people's name to interrupt people. Mentioning the time can be a really good way to keep people on track. Look, I know I told you this would take 20 minutes. We've already taken 15, so I don't want to take up any more of your valuable time. That can be a good way to get back on track, because people will, again, not really be thinking consciously about the time. They will just have it in the back of their minds that this is taking too long. And then when we kind of snap them back to, it's sort of politely saying, you are the one taking up the time here. When we remind them that, look, we want to get through this as quickly as possible, that's kind of the line their brain will connect. It'll go, oh yeah, right, we should probably get back on track. So when we're framing it in their best interest, that's always the key thing here. We're saying, look, I want to make sure that you're off the phone as quickly as possible. That's the subtext for this. You know, we've taken up 20 minutes of your time. I told you it would take 20 minutes. We've already taken 15. I want to make sure that we get you back off to the rest of your evening as quickly as possible. So I'm going to move on to this next question, or I'm going to correct that, or I think we've made a mistake. I just need to go back a question. Whatever it is, that can be a bit more kind of tactful there. If people are getting off track and, you know, going off onto something completely irrelevant, that's where I would use answer ask. So I think with ESS, often what people will go off on tangents on are things like the government not giving them the support they need, not having the funding to do things, not having skilled workers, that sort of thing. Often it will be something that they will ask questions as they go, as part of, especially when people kind of get going into a rant. If there's any space that we can politely butt in, if they ask a question or if they make a statement, answer that with your own statement, and then immediately transition into a new question. For example, look, I appreciate your input there. I've made a note of that. I just want to move on to this next question now, which is, and then just transition straight into the next question. Or look, unfortunately, I don't have the ability to make a note on this question. However, we do have some open questions a bit later on. So what I'm going to do is just move on for the time being, because I want to keep us on task here, and then just keep the kind of the flow of the survey moving. Because again, if we allow them to get off topic and just kind of eat into their own time, they will then blame us for that, because, and you know, fair enough, because we're supposed to be in charge here. We're the ones who are supposed to be managing this. So when we don't, then it becomes more difficult for them to justify staying on the phone with us. Yeah, I think that's always worth kind of keeping in mind. On ESS in general, I think there's a lot that we can kind of reframe how we ask things. So when we're justifying why someone should take part, it's always best to focus on the benefits of that. So there's a lot that we can do that then leads into further kind of negotiation tactics and objection handling. So we always want to frame, I mean, we always want to frame everything that we do as in someone's best interests. Now, we do that because A, it is, and B, that's how people find it easiest to justify taking part in their own head. To point A, this is in people's best interests. We do this research, as well as all of the research that we do, to help people. The clients that we work for are mostly governmental, obviously not all governmental. We do have some private clients, but when we do government research, it is so the government can help people in better ways, whether that is directly by offering, more targeted support or introducing new legislation, or indirectly by kind of tweaking what already exists, and policy changes that might benefit the entire economy, as opposed to individual industries. When we're talking about ESS, because of the employer skills survey that we've been doing, I forget exactly how long, but definitely a while. It's been 10 or so years. Because of ESS directly, we've introduced things like T-levels and traineeships, which have introduced new avenues for people to get into work, to then open up a bigger hiring pool for industries. So obviously apprenticeships have been a thing for time immemorial. That's something that, you go back to the medieval ages, you have blacksmiths' apprentices. That's the same basic concept. You have someone who works for very little or no money to get the skills, who then becomes a skilled tradesman. T-levels and traineeships opened up more of that, as well as more kind of government funding to make sure that there was more avenues to get people into work, which has then helped people fill out those vacancies. That is, as I said, a direct result of the feedback that ESS gathered. So we need to get this feedback to get people actually, opening up about what their needs are as a business, whether that is, a couple of people working in a newsagent or a multinational conglomerate. It is something that we need to make sure that we get a fair and balanced representation of everybody's views, so that nobody gets left behind. Because if we only speak to multinational conglomerates, then they're the ones who are going to be represented. It's up to us to make sure that we get that fair and open feedback from everybody, to make sure that everyone gets a say. And that's part of why we use the sampling method that we do. So the sampling methodology that we use for ESS is called RPS, random probability sampling. That means that we call every piece of sample that we have a set number of times, to make sure that everybody has the same chances of taking part as everybody else. So I'm just getting some water. Throat's getting a bit dry. So yeah, when we try and convince people to take part, again, it just becomes about pushing it to people's best interests. Why should they take part? Well, because it's to help you, whether directly or indirectly. This is something that is aimed at helping businesses like yours. The government wants to offer the best support it can. Now, again, people may have objections at that point and say, well, the government never really does anything to help me. Why should I help the government? Which is a fair objection. We're never, I think what often people can confuse us for working on the government side, which is not what we do. We are working on behalf of the government, but we are impartial here. We need to get feedback to give to them, whether that's, positive, negative, constructive, however we want to phrase that. We want to make sure that we can get that no matter what. So when people say like, well, why should I help the government? The government never helps me. Or I don't like the Labour government or the Conservative government or whatever government is in power at the time. It becomes about explaining that, look, this is an impartial thing. This is something that is, across the aisle, no matter what party you support, the government that has asked us to do this is doing so because they want to offer better support to companies like yours. If that's something that you don't feel has been done, this is exactly the time to get that feedback from you, so that you have, your voice heard. If you don't give this feedback, it'll continue in the status quo, which you are saying you're not happy with. So then it becomes about kind of justifying, why should this person take part? Well, it's in their best interest. Now, that might be something that directly helps them because they need access to things like T-levels or traineeships, which didn't exist before, now do. Maybe that's helped them. Or maybe it's something that has just helped more people into the workforce. Maybe it's helping people who previously couldn't look for work find work through any number of different programs that have been introduced or maybe introduced in the future, whether that's helping disabled people back into work, or changing how we introduce apprenticeships, whether that's offering higher paid apprenticeships, all of which is obviously conjecture and hypothetical, but it just becomes about making people aware. Look, whether it directly or indirectly, all of the feedback that we get is to help businesses like yours. We're not doing this just for fun. We're not doing this to take advantage of anyone. We're doing this to make sure that your feedback is taken into account and consideration, so that businesses like yours get the same leg up as everyone that we speak to. I think, again, with thinking about ESS, when we are speaking to anyone in jobs like this, it is going to be very appointment driven because A, it is a longer survey, and B, the types of people that we need to speak to can at times be quite busy. Now, that's not to say we don't have quite a large scope for who we can speak to, which I'll come to in a minute. But it can be and is very appointment driven. So that is something that we will always have to contend with on ESS, as well as lots of other jobs. When we are trying to get people on the phone, obviously our first priority should be to get them completing the call whilst we've got them there. That's the ideal, but that's not always realistic for any number of reasons. They might be busy, they might be off sick, and they're the only person that we could speak to. It might be a partial, whatever it is. So appointments are going to be something that we have to contend with throughout this, and that comes back to partials as well. They are, again, part and parcel with everything that we do. Thankfully, on B2B, at least, when we make a definite appointment, that should roll back to us if we're working. So with other jobs that we do, like graduate outcomes, partials are essentially just thrown back into the sample pile, and it doesn't come up for us necessarily. It can, but it's just luck of the draw. Whereas on B2B, if we're working when that appointment is set for, that will be something that comes to us as a priority. So we can use that to our advantage when we are making appointments. If for example, you're working on Thursday, you can absolutely suggest that to someone. Okay, how about I call you back on Thursday at 2 o'clock? Does that work? And if they say, yeah, fantastic, cool, let's call back on Thursday at 2 o'clock. If they say, no, I'm not in on Thursday, I'm only in on Monday, and you're not working Monday, that's just how the chips fall, unfortunately. We have to cater to, what works for the respondent. But, it's absolutely fine to suggest a time for people. Lots of interviewers at IFF keep a appointment diary. So they will have, all of the appointments that they've booked in, and they'll write those down so that they know when those are coming up. Some people I always embrace the chaos and just hope for the best. I know I've got appointments coming up. I can't remember when they are. It'll be fine. Everyone has their own approach there. There's no wrong or right approach. But when we are setting definite appointments, that's something that is, we can have an influence on that by asking the respondents to make a note of that as well. This is a basic thing that a lot of companies use, most often dentists, doctors, when they need to cut down on the rate of no-shows, for example. If they're getting a lot of no-shows, they will very simply switch to, instead of giving out appointment cards that are filled out with someone's appointment, they'll just hand you the appointment card and the pen and then ask you to make a note of it. We are much more likely to hold ourselves to account when we have written something down, we've taken part in the arranging of something. So when we set a definite appointment, that just comes down to asking the person that we're speaking to, so have you got a pen and paper handy? If you just want to make a note of this as well. So my name is Bruno Davison. It might be myself. It might be someone else who calls back. It might be one of my colleagues. I'm going to call back on Thursday at 2 p.m. and we're going to finish off the ESS. That's the Employer Skills Survey. And we'll get that finished off Thursday, 2 o'clock. Just the act of writing that down boosts up the chances that they will actually hold themselves to account, make themselves available. Obviously, it's not going to work every time. Sometimes people will still be unavailable, but we want to give ourselves every chance at getting people on the line. So little things like that go a long way. Again, I think this comes back as well to focusing on the benefits. A lot of people just have no idea why the government is doing this. Why is the government doing this survey? Why is it going to help me? So the Department for Education, Department for Business and Trade, as this one is referring to, the Ministry of Defence, the HMRC, whoever we're working for, that's something that we need to be able to explain why something works, why something is being done. So ignore the goals here because they're not going to be accurate for what we're doing. But like I said, the Department for Education, Skills England, Scottish Government, Department for Economy in Northern Ireland, Welsh Government, they all want to help support businesses because it is in the government's interest that businesses succeed. If businesses succeed, they pay tax on every bit of business that they do. That helps fund the economy. That helps, people get into work. The people who are getting paid to be at work pay taxes. It is in everybody's best interest that everybody succeeds. So having that as a kind of an idea in the back of your mind, again, just helps justify why someone should take part. And yeah, again, we don't want to be discounting anyone. With ESS, we've got a good chunk of respondents that we can speak to. We're not that limited on it being just a manager or just a CEO. We've got a pretty broad scope for who we can speak to. So we just need someone who deals with the company's overall staffing, training requirements. So that might be someone in HR, that might be someone who deals with recruitment, that might be someone like me who's dealing with the training. There's a lot of open vacancy for who we can speak to there. With smaller businesses, more than likely going to be someone like the manager or just the owner. The bigger company gets, the more people that we've got to speak to. If they've got an HR department, it's probably going to be multiple people within that HR department that will be able to answer our questions. If it's a kind of mid-size company, people like the office manager will probably have a pretty good idea. There's a lot of scope for who we can speak to. So I think it becomes about making sure that we don't discount anyone. Because, yeah, there's a lot of... we've got a lot of ability to move around a business. Obviously, we can't take any referrals to head office, but we can certainly speak to people within a business, and that we can hop around quite a bit. So I think not discounting someone just because, if it's a small business and we speak to the receptionist, they're the gatekeeper that we speak to, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be able to help. you know, I've heard lots of examples where people will get the gatekeeper started, and then it becomes very quickly apparent that they are actually able to answer all the questions that we're asking, because there's only 5 people in the business, and the person who works on reception handles a lot of the secretarial work. They actually have a pretty good idea because they're the one who does the appraisals for that business. We should never discount anyone just because we don't think that they should be able to take part. We should always ask them, is that something that you'd be able to help me with? If it becomes, again, very clear that they absolutely can't help, they are saying, I don't know, to every question, then yeah, we're going to have to find someone else. We shouldn't continue a survey with someone who it's clear has no idea what we're talking about. But if that's the case, all we need to say is, look, I think maybe we need to speak to someone else. Who would we need to speak to have a good overview of things like staffing, training, and staff proficiency at the site? And if they say there is no one else, it's just me, then fair enough, we just need to keep going. But if you say, oh yeah, you probably need to speak to the manager, okay, no worries, when would they be available to speak, or could you transfer me to them just now? Because yeah, I think that is something that we don't need to kind of assume people won't be able to help. Go into it with an open mind to kind of try and get people started. That's always a good approach. Yeah, I mean, I think with everything on ESS as well as most projects that we run, it comes down to how we approach a call. So when we start a call, people are going to judge how we sound right out the gate. So it's up to us to then modulate and change our voice to make sure that we sound as appealing as possible to them. This is something that we need to change depending on who we're working for. So we often do work for the Department for Education. We often do work for the Ministry of Defence. Those are two, I would say, almost diametrically opposed tones that we need to take depending on who we're speaking to. When we start a call for example, the teachers and leaders job, that's a job that we do quite often, usually yearly. The tone that we need to strike for that, very different to the tone that we need to strike for Ministry of Defence job or HMRC job, where it pays for us to sound a lot more kind of sharp and proper. Whereas when we're speaking to like the teachers and leaders jobs, that's speaking to teachers at their work. It pays so much better to go into that sounding more friendly, more casual, more relaxed. When we do ESS, I think it's a good middle ground. We don't want to sound too sharp. We don't want to sound too cold. We also don't want to sound too friendly. I think there's a good middle ground where we're just sounding polite and confident. And that is the key word there, confidence, because that's what will convince people. Everyone's voice is different, obviously. And so there's no one correct tone that works for everyone. The 2 highest performers on ESS at the moment have 2 incredibly different approaches for their tone. One of them is very kind of laid back almost, I would say quite casual. The other is much more straight to the point and very direct in their approach. They are both absolutely the correct tone because it works for those interviewers. If we just take those and try and replicate them, that might not work because it's something that is going to sound different to us on every intro that we make or change, chop and rearrange. The words that we say are great, but how we sound, that's what people are really kind of basing their judgment of us on. So if we just copy someone else's approach, it's not necessarily going to work for us because our voice sounds completely different. So I'll give you some examples.
It just sound unnatural.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll play some just quick intros on here.
Good morning. Looking to over, please?
Can you hear that all right? Is that coming through?
Yeah, I can hear that.
In all correctness, can I help at all? Yeah, sorry. So my name's Maria Hussein. I'm calling from Scottish Government for myself. Could I please speak to the office manager in that case, then, please? Speaking, yes. Hello there. I'm just looking to speak with the manager or an assistant manager, if possible. That'd be myself. Hello. My name's Nina Jar. I'm just calling on behalf of the Government Department for Education from ISS. I'm just calling because I appreciate your cooperation in providing some information regarding employee number and any training provided by your establishments over the past 12 months. It's just concerning employer skills. It's just something we have to do every 2 years with different business sites. Convenient for you, we can address the questions quite quickly. I wouldn't take up too much of your time at all. Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is Charlotte Summers. I'm calling on behalf of the Government Department for Education. So nice to speak to you. We need to speak to your office at your London branch. I've got the post for this. If I'm helping the Department for Education with the biannual report they do to help support businesses.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon.
Hello. Yes, hi. Can I speak to the manager there, please, or the owner?
Yeah, who's calling, please?
My name is Elizabeth Barrett. I'm calling on behalf of the Government Department, the Department for the Economy, Northern Ireland.
Thank you for call, Pete.
Who's speaking?
It's Patrick Fleming on behalf of the Welsh Government from IFF.
Okay, yeah, just a second. Hello, this is Paul speaking.
Hello, Paul. It's Patrick Fleming from IFF on behalf of the Welsh Government.
Okay, how can I help you?
Hello, Paul. Yeah, we're just calling concerning the employer skills survey. Really a few basic questions about staff training in the business. Is that something you could help us with?
Yeah, we from a training perspective, yeah, just how can we help you? Just a base.
Yeah, that's right. It was a few basic questions, mostly one-word answers, yes and no, that
Okay.
thing. Would that be possible to do that quickly with you now, Paul?
Yeah, can be a problem.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll run through it as fast as we can. Just first.
So all of those completely different approaches. There's no one correct way to kind of aim for other than confident. Every one of those had that in common. They all knew what they were talking about, or at least sounded like they did. That's one thing that I will always come back to is it doesn't matter if you know what you're talking about or not. It just doesn't. As long as you sound like you do, that's the key thing. When we, are delivering an introduction, it might be a job that we have just started. It might be a job that we've been working on for a month. It doesn't matter if we are completely aware of the subject matter or not. Obviously, it helps if we are. But realistically, the introduction is the key thing here. When we deliver that, that's us setting up the next 5, 10, 20 minutes of someone's phone call. So how we deliver that matters, because if we go into it not sounding like we have a clue and we're saying, hi, could I, it would be really good if I could ask you some questions. It's just about kind of the staffing kind of thing that you have at your job. That's going to immediately put people on edge, because they're going to think this person has no idea what they're doing, and rightly so. Which I think a lot of people worry that they're new to something, so they have to get it all perfect. Absolutely not. It is much less about getting everything correct as it is delivering it with confidence. You can stumble, make mistakes. That is all fine. If you trip over your words, if you get an introduction wrong, if you say your own name incorrectly, whatever it is, it's how you recover from that. If you then, get really hung up on that, I'm so sorry. I'm not used to doing this. I'm so sorry. This is all, it's all gone horribly wrong. That's going to inform people that, yeah, this is probably not something that they need to use their time on. But if you say, I'm so sorry, this is my first day, this is all a bit new, bear with me a second. I'm going to restart that and get it right the second time. So, starting again, my name is Bruno Davison. I'm just calling from IFF on behalf of the Government Department for the Economy in Northern Ireland, whatever it is. It is just about making people feel at ease. And when we sound like we know what we're talking about, that goes a long way to make people think that we do know what we're talking about. Now, obviously, if it's a new project, that might be something that we've never worked on before. We might not have a good idea of, you know, everything in the survey, and that's fine. All we need to do is memorize a short paragraph, really, which is mostly stuff that we should really remember, our own name and where we work. And then the client that we're calling on behalf of, and a really simple, basic understanding of what the survey is. Hi there, my name is Bruno Davidson. I'm calling from IFF on behalf of the Government Department for Education. I need to ask you a few very basic questions about staffing and training within your workplace. I'd like to go through those questions with you just now. Would that be all right? That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And just having it sound conversational and natural goes a long way into just letting people be aware that you are A, not trying to scam them out of anything, not trying to sell them anything, and B, you are confident in what you're saying. We always look to people who know what they're talking about. If you think about every politician, news anchor, they all have a pretty innate understanding of how they should sound. Or innate's probably the wrong term to use there. It is a learned thing. Some people have it innately, of course, but look at every news anchor. They all sound pretty much the same. It doesn't matter if their accent changes. It doesn't matter if they're in America, Australia, Zimbabwe, the UK, wherever it is. There's a cadence to what they say. Hello, this is the 6 o'clock news. Tonight, and then they'll launch into, you know, whatever it is. Unrest in the Middle East, mixed with, you know, council tax raises in Edinburgh have led to, you know, violent clashes, whatever it is. There's a cadence to how they sound. Same thing for politicians. They will always point with their thumb and they will say, I want to deliver for you. It's up to us to change what needs to change. They'll always enunciate a lot. They will always use direct language. They will always appeal to people's sense of self. When we do any of this, it is just about portraying what we want to be perceived. We want people to perceive a safe, comfortable environment where they feel comfortable, you know, having a chat with us. So when we deliver our introduction and sound like we know what we're talking about, that goes a long way into getting people feeling like we're just here to have a quick chat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. No, I just realized I've been talking for quite a while. That has been a full hour. So we can leave it there. Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask, or anything else that you were kind of unsure on, anything that you wanted to cover?
No, I'm good for now. Yeah, I feel like you've covered pretty much everything really. But yeah, I'm good.
Cool. Okay. I tried to keep it different to what we did last time. Obviously, there's that's on YouTube. I posted a link on Bob. There should be a transcription underneath that. I think AI summaries as well. You can use to get kind of a basic understanding of that. I think what I'll do as well is I'll take the transcripts for today and last week, and I'll upload those as separate Word documents onto Bob, just with a kind of a index, so you can kind of search through stuff. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. But yeah, okay, cool. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining. And we'll yeah, best luck. And
all right,
if you need anything, yeah, do get in touch either with
Cheers.
me or your
Thank you for your time so much. Cheers. Bye bye.